Total War is one of, if not the biggest strategy game franchises of all time. It has been a landmark for many RTS games in the past and will carry on being the flagship for all PC real-time strategies in the future. But where did it start? Where has it been along the way? So sit back, relax, and welcome to the history of Total War. In the year 2000 came the first iteration into the Total War franchise. This was Shogun Total War. Set in Japan during the Warring States period from the 15th to the beginning of the 17th centuries, the game put players in the shoes of a leader in the Japanese clans, attempting to conquer the nation and claim possession of the shogun. The game introduced aspects such as religion, diplomacy, and of course, military force. Being received well by the majority of people, Shogun was also known for having various glitches throughout, but the game fixed it somewhat later. But being the first game in the franchise, of course, it didn't really affect the sales for the game too much. Later on in 2001 came the Mongol Invasion expansion pack, adding playable versions of the Mongols who were on their collision course with Japan at this time. The success of their first game gave CA the motivation to start the Total War franchise, and Shogun being the beginning of everything. Next in 2002 came the second addition to the Total War franchise, Medieval. Bringing back many of the successful mechanics and gameplay devices from Shogun, Creative Assembly decided to take the IP to the medieval ages. In this, the player builds a dynastic empire in Europe, North Africa and the Middle East during the periods of 1087 to 1453. Medieval Total War brought in more tactics and even more strategy in the battle, with turn-based gameplay on a province-by-province level. Later on in 2003 was the addition of a Viking Invasion expansion pack, extending the map of the British Isles and western part of Scandinavia, with of course players assuming the roles of the Viking invaders. Overall, Medieval Total War was well received by fans of the predecessor, although having a lower overall rating due to some of the criticisms to unit management in battles, yet with the new addition of siege battles and the strategy portion of the game gave an overall sense of historical accuracy, and Medieval Total War was a great commercial success. In 2004 came what was arguably the most successful and popular Total War game to date. Rome Total War graced the scene, bringing players into the ancient times. The campaign was set during the late Roman Republic and early Roman Empire. Players started off with one of the three main Roman families, Julii, Scipii and Brutii. After campaign completion, a wide host of new factions would be unlocked. At the strategic level, players manage diplomacy, develop infrastructure, move armies, and manage the population's growth and public order through the taxes and gladiatorial games. On the tactical scale, the players command real-time battles against the enemy armies within or between cities. Later, the Barbarian Invasion and Alexander expansions were released, which of course were very successful, like Rome. The game was released to a critical acclaim, being one of the best ever reviewed PC strategy games at the time. And Rome Total War does actually have a special place in my heart, as it was the first Total War game I personally played and got me into what was to become one of my favourite gaming franchises. 2006 saw the start of the sequels. After the success of the first Medieval Total War, CA came back to the time era with Medieval 2 Total War. Although said it was more of a refinement to the series rather than a big leap ahead, Medieval 2 Total War was received massively by the fans. Graphics were improved, new units added, cities, and improving on gameplay with a new modelling troop system on the battlefield, with limbs, body features being more detailed and varied than its predecessors. Medieval 2 hit the biggest success story with the release of the Third Age Total War mod, introducing Total War into Middle-earth. This was a huge success and brought countless numbers of players to the franchise. Also later on came the Medieval Kingdoms being added. But where would the Total War franchise go next? What possible time eras could the player experience now? That was all answered in 2009 with the release of Empire Total War. Focusing more on the early modern period of the 18th century, Empire Total War was the first of a completely new engine, the Warscape engine. Praise was given for the strategic breadth, accurate historical battles and visual effects of the game. Unfortunately, the new engine came with a number of setbacks, such as terrible AI and mass bugs occurring throughout the game. But this was the start to a run of more gunpowder-based Total War games, which would have great success in the future. 2010 brought Napoleon Total War, a standalone add-on to Empire. The game focused on the role of Napoleon Bonaparte, being set in Europe, North Africa and the Middle East during the 18th and early 19th century. For the time, the graphics of Napoleon Total War looked great, and personally I still think they hold up to this day. Unlike other Total Wars, Napoleon Total War had completely separate campaigns. First being the Italian campaign, then his escapades in Egypt, and then the domination of Europe, and finally the campaigns of the Coalition, playing new factions such as the UK, Russia, Prussia or the Austrian Empire. The second sequel in the Total War series came along with Shogun 2. 11 years after the previous Shogun game was released, Shogun 2 had some living up to do. Set in a shorter time expanse of 16th century feudal Japan, the country is fractured into rival clans, led by local warlords fighting for control. Featuring 8 factions, and then later having a limited edition adding a 9th ninja clan, and finally a later DLC unlocking a 10th clan. Shogun 2 was widely received as a great step in the Total War franchise. It was praised for returning to its roots, and later in 2012 adding in the expansion Fall of the Samurai, bringing a mix of some Napoleon/Empire type troops into the Japanese based game. 2013 had some, let's say, interesting additions to the Total War franchise. Along came Total War Rome 2. It's fair to say Rome 2 had a bit of a rocky start, having yet low reviews at its initial release and fans all over the world displaying a distaste with the buggy mess. Going back to the Roman era, Rome 2 tried to provide a more sophisticated portrayal of each of the cultures than the original game. Despite its initial thoughts from critics and fans alike, Total War Rome 2 became the most bought Total War game at the time, and had the most concurrent players on its release date. To this day, it is a great Total War to go back into, and the majority of the bugs and issues have actually been fixed. I still love playing Rome 2 Total War to this date. Much like the original Rome Total War and Barbarian Invasion, Total War Rome 2 had its own Hunnic brother. Along came Total War Attila in 2015. Fixing most of the bugs of Rome 2, Attila had much more successful release. Once allowing players to thrive as a Roman general, Total War Attila now let fans saddle up as the infamous Hunnic leader, Attila. Sweeping Europe, the Horde destroyed anything in its path, and it was the players' turn to take control. Finally in 2016 came the ever more hyped Total War Warhammer. Somewhat creating friction with the fans of the historical Total War games, Warhammer turned out to be a massive success and being the most sold Total War game to date. Bringing in fans from both Total War and Warhammer, Total War Warhammer gave a fantasy lick into the franchise, bringing in completely new units, mechanics such as magic, and the ever-feared flying troops, which turned out in the end to work amazingly. Because of the mass success of the Warhammer inclusion into Total War, CEA have announced Total War Warhammer 2, coming out sometime in 2017. But what will be the next Total War? Will we go back in history? And what will it be? I would love to see your comments in the description. Total War has come a long way and has a massive future ahead of it. But we will have to wait to see what is in store for us fans. But until then, I will see you in the next one.